I never dreamed of fame. I just loved to cook. But when my life suddenly turned into a TV show, I realized one thing. Not everyone standing beside you in the spotlight is there because of you. Some are just waiting to push you out of it. I never dreamed of fame. I just loved to cook. It started when I was 12, watching my grandmother knead dough with arthritic fingers, humming old jazz tunes while steam curled from the pot on the stove. I never thought I'd be on TV. I never thought I'd be recognized in airports or asked for selfies in grocery stores. And I sure as hell never thought the woman I married, Sienna, would be the reason I almost lost it all. Back when I was still working as a sous chef at a modest bistro in Charleston, I kept my head down. I cared about fresh ingredients, precision, and treating food like art. My coworkers joked that I was too quiet to ever make it big. But then came the national competition show, Blaze the Plate. I entered on a dare. 10 weeks later, I was holding the trophy and shaking hands with celebrity chefs I used to study like gospel. That's when Sienna reappeared. We'd known each other back in high school. She was the kind of girl who lit up a room without trying. Elegant, clever, always 5 steps ahead of everyone else. Back then, I was invisible to her. Just a skinny kid who liked culinary science more than football. But when she messaged me on Instagram, it was like fate had flipped the script. "Julian, I can't believe it's you. You're incredible out there. I always knew you'd do something amazing," she wrote, followed by a flurry of fire and chef emojis. We started talking, then seeing each other. And then, within 6 months, we were married. I knew people would talk. They always do when someone rises fast. I was the new face of American cuisine. She was a former commercial actress with charm to spare. But I believed her. She said she wanted to help me stay grounded. Said she knew how to manage press, how to keep the wolves at bay, how to grow my brand without selling my soul. She asked if she could help handle PR. It felt natural, easy, like we were a team. And for a while, we were. She came with me to food festivals, whispered timing cues before interviews, and even helped design the logo for my new restaurant, Marks and Fire. She was magnetic. The press loved her. She smiled on red carpets like she was born to do it. And I started to think maybe, just maybe, I was lucky. But things shifted after season 2 of Blaze the Plate. The producers wanted a spin-off, a weekly lifestyle segment called Fire at Home, where I'd cook, talk about techniques, and feature guests. It was a big deal. National syndication. Primetime slot. I signed the deal without blinking. That's when Caleb Royce entered the picture. He was the show's executive producer. Slick hair, silk shirts, that permanent smirk of someone who thought he was the smartest guy in every room. At first, I figured he was just a suit, all notes and budgets. But he took a peculiar interest in Sienna. He'd compliment her ideas a little too eagerly, lingered during wrap drinks, always standing just a bit too close. I didn't say anything. I wasn't the jealous type. Or maybe I didn't want to admit what I was starting to suspect. Then came the contracts. One afternoon, while reviewing some new appearance schedules, I noticed a clause I hadn't approved. One that gave production rights to Fire at Home, merchandising to a company I'd never heard of, Blake Royce Media Ventures. My heart sank. I confronted Sienna that night. She didn't flinch. "It's just a formality," she said, brushing it off. They needed a quick setup for licensing. Caleb thought it would streamline negotiations. "It's temporary." I nodded, but something inside me twisted. Over the next few weeks, more strange things piled up. Sienna started staying late at strategy meetings. Caleb began dropping cryptic comments about the show's future, how fresh faces were trending, how versatility mattered more than culinary skill on screen. Then, one night, I overheard them. I'd come back to the studio to grab my forgotten phone. The lights were low, the hallway echoing with footsteps. As I approached the back office, I heard Caleb's voice, low, suggestive, cocky. "You keep working this angle, babe. In a few months, they won't even remember his name. This show's gonna be yours." Then Sienna's soft laugh, a sound I knew too well. "He's so focused on his sauces and signature dishes, he doesn't even see what's happening. Let's just make sure he signs the next set of papers." I stood frozen, heart hammering. That was the night everything changed. I didn't burst in. I didn't scream. I turned and walked out. Quietly, calmly. Because if they thought I was naive, let them. If they thought I wouldn't fight back, let them. But I wasn't going to lose everything I'd built. Not to them. Not like this. I started collecting everything. Emails, contracts, schedules, transfer requests. I reached out to the network's legal counsel, quietly hired an IP attorney. I pretended things were fine, smiled on camera, kissed Sienna before events. But every moment was calculated now. And then, I planned the reveal. The network was organizing a 5-year anniversary special of Blaze the Plate. Live broadcast, full cast, red carpet, guest performances. Caleb was directing. Sienna had insisted on co-hosting. Perfect. I wrote my segment script with care. I made sure production signed off on it. I even let Sienna review it. She smiled when she handed it back. Looks perfect, babe. It was. But what she didn't know was that the real script, the one I'd read on air, was waiting in a sealed envelope, along with a surprise video clip and an NDA waiver signed by the network the day before. Because I wasn't just going to expose the affair. I was going to show the world exactly how far they went to erase me. The anniversary special was set to be a celebration. 5 years of culinary battles, behind-the-scenes laughs, and breakout stars. The network went all out. Stage lights, a live audience, media booths, even a champagne sponsor. Everyone expected a feel-good evening with nostalgia and heartfelt speeches. That's what I let them believe. Caleb had spent the week walking around like he owned the building. He talked too loud, barked orders at the tech crew, and kept making side comments like, "Get ready for the Sienna show," and the future's got a new face. Sienna, meanwhile, played the role of the charming, elegant co-host. She wore a silver gown that shimmered under the lights, her arm curled effortlessly around mine as we posed for photographers. To anyone watching, we were the golden couple of food television. But under that tuxedo, I was wired tight. I'd rehearsed every word I was about to say, timed every beat of the segment, and arranged for a trusted tech guy, someone I knew from my earliest days on set, to trigger the media file when I gave the cue. The broadcast opened as expected. Highlights of past winners, interviews with former judges, some light banter between the hosts. Then it came, the heart of the Flames segment. Mine. I was supposed to do a live demo of a nostalgic recipe, Grandma's sweet cornbread with smoked chili honey butter, while talking about the journey and what the show had meant to me. I stood at the center island, camera 3 trained on my face, the sizzle of the skillet starting to fill the audio. I used to think, I began, voice calm, that this show was about food, about who could plate the prettiest dish or elevate the humble potato. But over the years, I've learned something much deeper. Sienna stood at stage left, smiling for the crowd, unaware of the paper in my pocket. Caleb was behind the main camera, arms crossed, watching closely. This show, I continued, was about trust. Trust in your team, in your partners, in your vision. And when that trust is broken, well, even the best recipe falls apart. Sienna's smile faltered, just slightly. Caleb tilted his head. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the sealed envelope. I was asked to share my favorite memory tonight, I said. And I will. But I'd like to share it in full context. I looked directly into camera 1 and gave a slight nod to the tech booth. My guy caught it instantly. The live feed flickered for a moment, and then the preloaded video began to play. It wasn't grainy or hacked together. It was a clean recording from the studio's internal surveillance system, unedited, time-stamped. First clip, Sienna in a dim conference room with Caleb, leaning across the table, whispering as she placed her hand on his chest. Second clip, Caleb saying, "We'll spin the narrative. He's exhausted. Out of touch. You'll step in as host next season. Trust me." Third clip, a document, zoomed in, with Sienna's forged signature next to mine on a licensing agreement I'd never seen. Fourth, Caleb kissing her neck as she signed. The room went silent. The audience froze. Sienna dropped her cue cards. I turned back to the stove, flipped the cornbread with casual precision, and spoke again. I love what I do. I've given this show everything. And I'm not ashamed of how hard I worked to get here. But I will not stand by and let lies and ambition take away what I've built. Camera 2 caught Sienna now, white-knuckled, blinking hard, trying to maintain composure. "This footage," I said, "was given to the network last week. I've spoken with legal. I've withdrawn my name from every brand tied to these 2 individuals. I've filed for divorce. And as of tonight, I'm launching my own independent show, Salt and Marks, streaming next month." Thunderous applause erupted from the audience. Sienna turned, searching for Caleb, but he had already left the control booth. The camera cut briefly to backstage, catching him storming toward the exit, phone pressed to his ear. I stayed calm. I'm not here to burn anyone's house down, I said, voice steady. But I won't be a stepping stone. I won't be anyone's fool. A beat. Then I smiled. Now let's finish this cornbread, shall we? The rest of the segment played out in a surreal blur. The audience clapped too loud. The producers were in chaos. The chat feed online exploded. Hashtags forming within seconds. Hashtag Sienna exposed. Hashtag justice for Julian. Hashtag fire at home lies. After the show, I walked past Sienna in the hallway. She tried to speak. Julian, you don't understand. It was never about. But I didn't stop. There's nothing left to explain, I said, without even turning. She didn't follow. In the days that followed, the fallout was swift. Caleb was fired by the network. Multiple outlets picked up the story. Sienna tried to deny everything at first, claimed it was out of context. But the forged signatures and leaked emails ended her PR career overnight. My new show was fast-tracked. Within a month, I had sponsors lined up, my own production team, and full creative control. But none of that compared to the quiet satisfaction of knowing I hadn't just walked away. I'd stood up, told the truth, and reclaimed my name. I didn't expect sympathy, and I didn't need it. What I needed was space. After the live reveal, I turned off my phone for a few days and drove out to the Blue Ridge Mountains. There was a cabin I used to rent before all the fame. Back when a weekend away meant time to sketch recipes, think in silence, and remember why I started cooking in the first place. That's where I went. No cameras, no reporters, no chaos. I left my name behind at the gate. It was strange how quiet it felt without her voice in the background. Sienna had filled every room she entered, always orchestrating, always managing, always guiding the narrative. But in that stillness, I remembered something important. Before she showed up, I'd been just fine. Better, even. Back in Charleston, the world was spinning. Online, the video had gone viral. Clips were re-uploaded, dubbed, edited into memes. A culinary gossip channel posted a deep dive titled Chef Julian Savage Betrayal Unleashed Live. Fans sent messages of support by the thousands. And while I appreciated their words, none of them really knew what it had cost me to keep my face steady during that broadcast. They didn't know how many nights I'd sat alone in the green room, wondering why Sienna never came home before midnight, or how it felt to hear my name being reduced to a brand in rooms I wasn't even invited into. They didn't see the way she'd flinch when someone asked how we met, like my origin story was too boring to repeat. Still, I hadn't exposed her for the audience. I did it for me, because no matter how strong I seemed on screen, I'd started to doubt my own worth off of it. That's what betrayal does. It eats at your confidence from the inside out. I had to face it head on, not just for my career, but to take back my own damn dignity. By the time I came down from the mountain, Salt and Marks was in pre-production. My lawyer had finalized the paperwork. Divorce filed. Licensing revoked. Financial assets secured. We'd traced every forged signature, every unauthorized transfer Sienna and Caleb had tried to sneak through. With the evidence I'd gathered, they were lucky I wasn't pressing criminal charges. Sienna tried contacting me again, this time through mutual friends. One of them, Amanda, called me up. She's devastated, Amanda said. She says she made a mistake, that it got out of hand. I didn't respond for a second. She planned it for months, I said quietly. That's not a mistake. That's strategy. Julian, she's not asking to fix things. She just wants to explain herself. Closure. I exhaled through my nose. She closed the book the moment she used me like a ladder. Click. That was the end of that. The producers of Blaze the Plate issued a formal apology and scrubbed most references to Sienna and Caleb from their promotional materials. It didn't erase what happened, but it made the message clear they were done with both of them. And that's when the other stories started surfacing. Turns out, Sienna had tried something similar before, twice. Both men weren't public figures, and neither wanted to come forward at first. But once my story went viral, they sent anonymous messages to my lawyer. One had been a tech startup founder. The other, a local theater director. Both had invested in her branding expertise. Both had been left empty-handed when things didn't go according to her plan. She had a pattern, and I had been her golden goose. But that goose had teeth. Salt and Marks premiered exactly 6 weeks after the live reveal. It wasn't flashy. No giant set. No studio audience. Just me, a rustic kitchen space I designed myself, and a single camera. The first episode was titled Humble Beginnings, My Grandmother's Kitchen. It trended within hours. The comments section filled with messages not just from foodies, but from people who saw their own story in mind. Quiet professionals, creatives, builders, who'd once trusted someone only to be turned into a stepping stone. I wasn't trying to be anyone's hero, but somehow the honesty hit home. Then came the sponsor offers. Then the cookbook deals. Then the streaming networks knocking on my door. I accepted a few, rejected most. I was careful now. Every contract read twice, every partnership vetted. No more blind faith. But not bitterness either. Just awareness. The one thing I hadn't done yet was visit my old restaurant, Marks and Fire. Technically, I still own part of it. After all the legal fallout, the board offered to buy me out completely, but I asked them to wait. I needed to see it with my own eyes. So, one evening after closing, I walked through the back door the way I used to. The kitchen was still spotless. My old knife roll still hung on its hook. The sous chef, Pablo, was cleaning up, and when he saw me, he smiled. "Chef," he said, "been too long." We sat at the prep table, talked for a bit. He told me business had dipped briefly after the scandal, but rebounded stronger. People respected the truth. They'd rallied behind me and stayed loyal to the food. "I always knew you weren't just a showman," Pablo said. "You were the real deal." She just didn't see it. I smiled faintly. She saw it. She just wanted to be it. That night, I stood outside the restaurant, watching the glow of the sign I designed light up the street. For the first time in months, I felt calm. They tried to erase me. Instead, they reminded the world who I really was. And I was just getting started. It didn't take long for the world to move on from Sienna Blake. The same internet that once swooned over our power couple turned on her with lightning speed. One week, she was a rising star in lifestyle media. The next, a cautionary tale in every think piece titled, "When Ambition Turns Toxic." But the strange part was, I didn't feel joy in her downfall. I didn't replay the video clip or read the cruel comments. I wasn't looking for her pain. I just didn't want to be part of her story anymore. I was building something better. Salt and Marks became more than a cooking show. It turned into a movement. People responded to its rawness. There were no scripted smiles, no fake applause. I cooked like I did in real life, focused, honest, and always with something personal simmering beneath the surface. Each episode told a story. Some were about food, sure, but others were about trust, family, betrayal, reinvention. And the audience grew. I'd receive letters, handwritten ones, from people in small towns who said my story gave them the strength to walk away from their own Siennas. A teacher in Michigan, a mechanic in Arizona, a woman who ran a farm stand in Vermont. They weren't writing about recipes. They were writing about starting over. But even as the world around me healed, I knew one thing hadn't ended. Caleb Royce. While Sienna was the face of the betrayal, Caleb was the architect. And he wasn't the type to disappear quietly. After getting fired from the network, he tried launching his own digital platform, one aimed at raw, unfiltered storytelling. He posted a 10-minute video titled "The Truth About Blaze the Plate," where he painted himself as the victim of corporate manipulation. Claimed he and Sienna were consensual adults who were unfairly targeted for challenging the old model of show business. It would have been laughable if it hadn't landed with a specific crowd, people who hated me. There's always a group that roots for the villain. They clipped footage of me flipping cornbread and added captions like, "Fake nice guy plays the victim." Caleb did podcast interviews where he suggested I'd known about the affair all along and only turned on them when the brand slipped out of my control. He made it sound like I was bitter, broken, washed up. I ignored it for a while, but then I found out he was quietly pitching a new show to streaming platforms, Sparks in the Kitchen, a lifestyle meets drama cooking series with none other than Sienna Blake set to co-host. It wasn't just a show. It was a challenge. They wanted back in. Not humbled. Not changed. Just repackaged. And this time, I wasn't going to play defense. I called my lawyer and my brand manager. We pulled every non-compete clause Caleb had signed. Every clause Sienna had violated under our old contracts. Turns out, their new show wasn't just unethical. It was legally vulnerable. Especially since they were planning to use my recipes and some of the studio formats I developed. But I didn't sue them. Not yet. Instead, I let the platform executives know, quietly, that should they proceed, they'd be inheriting a lawsuit on day one. That they'd be backing a show where the two hosts were publicly disgraced and the content itself was tainted by breach of contract. My team didn't yell. They didn't posture. They simply laid out the facts. Within 10 days, Sparks in the Kitchen lost its distribution partner, then its investors, then its title sponsor. Sienna posted a tearful video on her page, claiming she was being blackballed and slandered by people afraid of strong women. The video had over 200,000 views in 48 hours, but even her followers weren't buying it anymore. Most of the comments read, "We watched the footage, Sienna. You did this to yourself. Stop playing the victim. He gave you everything. The only person who ever believed in you was Julian. And you used him. And me? I stayed silent." My show rolled into its third month with double the audience. I added a new segment, Guests at the Table, where I invited unsung chefs and small-town culinary voices to cook with me. No agents, no influencers, just real people with stories and spice. One afternoon, after filming an episode with a Gulf Coast fisherman who made crab stew that nearly made me cry, I sat outside the studio sipping coffee when a woman approached. She looked to be in her 50s, well-dressed, but not flashy, holding a small envelope. "You're Julian Marks?" she asked softly. I nodded. She handed me the envelope. "She asked me to give you this." I debated whether I should. "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. She paused. "I work for Sienna's family. I've known her since she was a teenager. I'm not here to defend her. Just thought you might want to read it." I took the envelope but didn't open it until hours later. It was a letter, written in Sienna's unmistakable looping script. "Julian, I know I can't undo anything, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know, it was never fake for me. I got lost in what I thought I deserved. Fame, credit, validation. But the truth is, I never deserved you. You were always the real thing. I hope, someday, you believe that, even if you don't believe me. S." I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it in the drawer of my desk without a word. Maybe she meant it. Maybe she didn't. But it didn't matter, because I wasn't building this life for her anymore. I was building it in spite of her. The letter stayed in my drawer, untouched, unread again. I didn't frame it, didn't burn it. I left it there, not as a keepsake, not as a wound, but as a reminder that even the deepest betrayal eventually becomes just paper. It was strange how quickly life stabilized after that. No more PR disasters. No more sabotage in the shadows. Just me, the kitchen, and the growing hum of a show that was finally mine. By the time Salt and Marks crossed the 100,000 subscriber mark on its independent platform, I stopped watching the numbers. It wasn't about popularity anymore. The success was nice, sure, but it didn't thrill me like it once might have. What mattered now was ownership, not of a company or a name, but of myself, my time, my truth. But that didn't mean I'd forgotten everything. Some things stick with you longer than bitterness ever could, like the sound of someone you trust laughing at your expense behind a closed door, or the feeling when you realize you were just a placeholder in someone else's plan. That's what Sienna had done. She used me as a pedestal, then tried to yank it out from under me. And Caleb, he saw me as a means to an end. He didn't care about food, or craft, or loyalty. Just optics, power, control. But what neither of them counted on, what so many people never count on, is that some of us don't need revenge to win. We just need to survive long enough for the truth to do the talking. Still, when I got word that Caleb Royce was shopping himself around to a cable food network under a fake consulting title, I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. He'd changed his last name to Kale. No joke. Caleb Kale. He was trying to rebrand. Apparently, he claimed to have insider experience producing some of the most successful culinary shows in the country, without naming specifics. The showrunner who called me about it was a friend from my early Blaze the Plate days. She laughed when she told me. "We asked him point blank if he'd ever worked with you," she said. "He danced around it like a politician on fire." I smiled. Let him dance. But later that night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I opened the envelope again. I read Sienna's letter a second time, this time slowly. Not for closure. Just curiosity. I don't know what I expected. Regret, maybe. Manipulation. But what I saw was a woman trying, desperately, to make sense of a trail she burned herself. Still didn't matter. By then, my schedule was packed. I had a spring lineup of special guests booked, including 2 military vets who started a catering company from their garage. I had a publisher courting me for a second cookbook, This one focused on slow meals and rebuilding after loss. I even got invited to a major culinary symposium in Copenhagen. First-class flight. VIP pass. Whole deal. I almost said no. But something in me whispered, go? Not to prove anything. Just to breathe. So I did. Copenhagen was clean and bright in April. I gave a talk titled The Quiet Kitchen, Building Resilience Through Ritual. It wasn't flashy. I didn't wear a chef's coat. Just jeans and a navy sweater. I spoke plainly. About what it means to create after betrayal. About how sometimes the most healing thing you can do is teach someone else how to make bread with their own hands. People listened. Really listened. Afterward, in the reception lounge, a young woman approached me. Maybe mid-20s, nervous, holding a tiny notebook. Chef Marks, she said. I just wanted to say, you're the reason I started culinary school. Not because of the show, well, that too, but because of the way you handled what happened. You didn't blow up. You didn't break down. You just kept cooking. I thanked her, and she started crying. Just a little. I was engaged, she said. He cheated. Said I was too boring. Said I'd never make it. But then I saw your story, and I thought, maybe it's okay to start over without trying to burn everything down. That's when I realized what Salt and Marks had really become. It wasn't just a kitchen. It was a signal. To people who'd been betrayed, who'd been discarded, who were told they weren't enough. I wasn't feeding viewers. I was showing them how to feed themselves again. Back in the States, a former producer from Blaze the Plate called me. She'd landed at a documentary studio and pitched an idea, a feature-length film about my story. Not a drama, a real documentary. Interviews, timeline, behind-the-scenes footage, the works. I hesitated. Think about it, she said. Not for fame, but for the people who never got to tell their side. I agreed, not out of vanity, but because I remembered how alone I'd felt when everything fell apart. If someone else could see my story and say, I'm not crazy for hurting like this, then maybe it was worth it. In the meantime, I bought a small house outside Asheville. Wood floors, wide kitchen, big oak tree out front. No cameras, no scripts, just me, the wind, and a few cast iron skillets. People still asked about Sienna sometimes. They always would. Do you think she loved you at all? Someone asked during a podcast. I didn't answer right away. I think she loved the idea of me, I said. And maybe that's worse than not loving me at all. But then I smiled. Because now, I finally love the real me. And I don't need anyone else's script to prove it. The morning my documentary premiered, I didn't watch it. I took a long walk through the woods behind my Asheville house instead. Let the dogs run ahead. Let the cold air bite at my cheeks. Let the silence stretch. It wasn't nerves. It was peace. When you've told the truth, you don't need to watch other people hear it. You already know how it ends. The film was called The Quiet Fire, Julian Marks. It opened with footage of me in a studio kitchen, chopping herbs with calm precision. The narrator didn't talk about fame. She talked about loss, about rebuilding, about what happens when the people closest to you light the match and smile while the fire catches. They used everything, clips from Blaze the Plate, behind-the-scenes footage, audio from interviews I'd forgotten I gave. But the part that hit the hardest came near the end. They aired the full uncut scene from the anniversary special, my reveal, my speech, the video evidence. The audience gasps. Sienna's frozen face. Caleb's exit. And then, without commentary, they cut to black. Let it speak for itself. The critics praised the film for its restraint. Unflinching, but not cruel, one reviewer wrote. A lesson in dignity under fire. I got messages from producers, authors, even a couple therapists who said they were using the story in workshops about boundary setting and emotional resilience. One email simply read, "Thank you for not yelling. Some of us needed to see that it's possible." Meanwhile, Caleb Royce, now back to using his real name, resurfaced in a late-night interview show a few weeks after the documentary aired. He wore a neutral-colored turtleneck, like he was trying to look serious. Spoke about redemption, growth, and public misunderstanding. He tried to sound humble. It didn't work. No one bit. The audience didn't clap. And the clip died online in less than a day. Sienna? She vanished. Not in a dramatic way. Just disappeared from the public eye. Her accounts went silent. The fashion deals dried up. The branding work stopped. And last I heard, she'd moved to a smaller city, taken a position as a junior marketing assistant in a local agency. Some whispered that she was trying to live a quieter life. Others claimed she still believed she'd make a comeback. I didn't care. Her arc wasn't mine to follow anymore. I had other things to think about. A publisher greenlit my second book, From Burned to Braised. Part memoir, part recipe collection, part quiet philosophy on how to find stillness in a chaotic world. I dedicated it to those who stayed calm when others raised torches. I expanded Salt and Marks to include travel episodes. Drove across the country with a small crew, cooking in family diners, farmhouses, and roadside shacks. We met a woman in Texas who made the best peach cobbler I've ever tasted. A father-daughter duo in Oregon who made grilled salmon on cedar planks like it was a religion. A retired Navy cook in Florida who taught me how to make crab-stuffed hush puppies with his eyes closed. I never told them my full story. They recognized me, of course, but I let them tell theirs instead. That's what mattered now. And still, even in the quietest moments, reminders would come. A fan mailing me a handwritten recipe with a note. Your story made me forgive myself. A teenage boy outside a bookshop in Chicago whispering, "You're the guy from the kitchen thing, right?" A message from a widower who wrote, "My wife passed 2 years ago. Watching you rebuild gave me permission to start cooking again." Those were the new definitions of success. Not ratings, not headlines, just impact. Real, quiet, permanent. One night, after filming a holiday special, I stood on the studio porch sipping warm cider. The air was crisp, snow just starting to fall. My producer, an old friend from culinary school named Carla, stood beside me. "You ever think about where you'd be if none of that had happened?" she asked. I took a slow breath. "Yeah," I said. "I'd probably still be cooking in a kitchen built by someone else. Still trusting the wrong people. Still thinking peace was the same thing as silence." She smiled. "You ever think about reaching out to her?" I shook my head. "No, not because I'm angry, but because I'm done being her audience." And that was the truth. I didn't need closure from her. I had closure from me. A few weeks later, I signed a deal to buy the building where I first learned to cook professionally. The little Charleston bistro where I worked as a sous chef before Blaze the Plate. The owner was retiring. Said he'd rather pass it to someone who understood what it meant to start with nothing but a flame and a spoon. I renamed it Marks and Embers. A nod to what came before. A sign that even ashes can give birth to fire again. On opening night, I didn't give a speech. I just lit the stovetop, tied on my apron, and let the food do the talking. Because some of us don't need to be seen anymore. We just need to be known. And I was. For who I really was. Finally. Completely. Quietly. Julian Marks. Chef. Builder. Survivor. And no one stepping stone ever again.